And thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. We know everyone has extremely busy schedules, so we appreciate you carving out some time. As Angel referred to, I am Chris O'Shea. I'm an employee benefits consultant here at Sentinel Benefits on the group insurance team. And my colleague, Chris Healy, who will introduce himself momentarily, and myself have had a lot of positive conversations over the last few months with a lot of prospective groups who are on a PEO today. And anyone in this webinar probably knows what that is, right? Professional employee organization, who are looking to make that transition. But for whatever reason, either time's got in the way, something's got in the way that they haven't been able to make that transition, right? So the purpose of our presentation today is just kind of walk you through all the steps, right? Kind of the boxes you have to check, some things you should consider, right? There's a lot of considerations to be made. Really the way we broke it out is kind of the why, when, and how of leaving your PEO. So I'll dive into that momentarily, but before I get to that, I do want to kick it over to my colleague, Chris Healy, to introduce himself and just kind of give you guys just kind of a high level of Sentinel and who we are here on the group insurance team.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Chris Healy. I am an employee benefits consultant here at Sentinel. I've been with Sentinel for 7 years, and a little background on us. We're pretty unique. We're a full service benefits firm that specializes in benefits consultants. So that's the group insurance aspect of it, but also the health and welfare administration, your FSAs, HRAs, HSAs, COBRA, along with a retirement practice that's advised on both advisory work, but also record keeping. We're headquartered in Wakefield, so right outside of Boston. With also a presence, an office in Long Island and Michigan. Here's some numbers, again, for specifically on the group insurance side. We partnered with over 400 employers. I serve over, 1,500 policies and just under 2 million in annual premium. Again, some numbers that we're definitely proud of, and we built really a great team over here at Sentinel, specifically, for group insurance, but also some of your other services you might need part of your benefits package.
All right, so just a little bit further, kind of the agenda, what we're going to cover today. So pretty much we're going to break the presentation into 3 different parts, as I referenced to earlier, right? Why might be a time to leave your PEO, right? So if you're in this room today, you might be considering, I thought about it in the past, or maybe you haven't thought about it. Maybe it's something new to you. Maybe it's something you haven't considered at all. So we're going to kind of give some triggers or some levers that you might be thinking about and why it might be time to leave your PEO, or at least evaluate what life might look like without a PEO, right? So not only why, but when. Timing is everything, as we know. So there's just a couple of different trigger points from a timing standpoint when you may look to transition out of the PEO. So not too in-depth there. And then we'll kind of conclude by just saying, how do you make the change, right? I mean, that's going to be the crux of the presentation today. There's a lot of considerations to be made, from new payroll provider to new benefits broker and so forth and so on. And we're going to kind of touch on all those. Additionally, we're going to kind of touch on at the end kind of how Sentinel fits into that picture. And Chris just kind of briefly touched on a little bit, but we'll conclude with that. So let's dive in here. So the why, right? So these are just some things to consider, right? As you're thinking about, why would I ever leave the PEO, or what might I be thinking about? What might be a good time to do it? So has your business outgrown the standard PEO technology and support system? So just a point that I probably should have made in my introduction, but prior to Sentinel, my time was actually spent in the PEO industry. So I sold PEO. So I have a pretty good understanding of how the model works and kind of what it looks like to transition from it. So these are a lot of the triggers that a lot of my client companies back then would think about. And now coming over to Sentinel, seeing it from the other angle, what people should be thinking about. So as you guys may know, being on a PEO model, the technology itself can be a canned solution, right? PEO serves a lot of clients across a variety of industries, from manufacturing to technology and so forth. If you're looking for a more tailored, customizable solution, especially as you move upstream and scale up, you might be able to get that through an HRIS provider that's outside and not just this canned PEO model, right? So if you're looking to improve upon technology, kind of come up with custom solutions, right? A lot of executive teams are talking about self-service for employees, automation, integrations, things like that. You may be better served outside the PEO to kind of hone in on a specific technology provider to serve you well there. Has the PEPM, right? So that might be a buzzword for folks. The per employee per month model become cost prohibitive. So as you guys may know, there's pretty much 2 fee structures to the PEO model. There's a per employee per month. It's a fixed administrative fee, right? And it's purely based off headcount. So it could be $150 per employee per month, $160, and so on and so forth. And that's just the administrative fee, right? That's essentially all the HR services and solutions that the PEO is giving to your company outside of benefits, taxes, and the other insurances. So it can be done in that fixed per employee, or it can be done, what Chris and I have also seen, as a percentage of payroll. So pretty much what that means is as your company continues to grow, right, and increase headcount, that administrative fee is going to get higher and higher the more people you bring on, right? So a lot of times what happens, and what Chris and I see, is that you may have been 5 employees or 10 employees when you came onto the PEO, and you got locked into a certain administrative fee. Well, now you're 30 employees, you're 40 employees, you're maybe 100 employees. You haven't even thought about it because you've just been growing the company and you don't even know what you're paying right now, but you're paying that same amount per employee per month, and it's starting to really creep up now that you guys are growing headcount. So a lot of times it can become cost prohibitive. Time to scale internally, right, to support that customized work-life employee culture. PEOs or the co-employment model is good for a lot of groups, but the PEO and the HR folks that are working with you, they're not inside your company. They're not inside the walls, right? There's obviously that emotional human component of HR. And especially as your company scales up, you're going to start hiring folks, recruiting, rewards, just HR generalist type seat, right? And those folks are going to sit internally. So a lot of times they can kind of be advocates for your employees, right? And your employees feel comfortable going to them, where the PEO model doesn't necessarily serve your employees on that work-life culture type aspect. It really serves you as an administrator and as a part, the liaison and the relationship between you and the PEO. So as you scale up and as you build out departments, sometimes it's better to just take it in-house because a lot of those services are being duplicated.
Can you begin to make your group medical experience work for you? And really what that means is, a lot of times, from a smaller group level, so most states it's, 50 employees, some, specifically New York or California are 100 employees below, you're really locked into that small group market, meaning you really have no control over it. It's typically census driven for the rates or community rated. But above that, once you get above either that 50 or even 100, you start to get more data. And data specifically in insurance and underwriting is huge, both for, on your end, but also any benefits partner that you work with, because you could start to look at and customize the plan designs. If you get to a point, typically over 100 enrolled, you have access to claims data. And really that allows you to see, what's going on. Where are we potentially having a lot of claims? You have a lot of negotiation power with this information, but it also makes you can have the ability to look at really that 3 to 5 year plan. How do we want to structure and customize our plan design? Do we want to look at, typically we see a lot of fully insured, but there's other funding models such as level funded or self-funded. And what we can do is analyze that data to see exactly how things are running and be able to say, hey, maybe this solution would be better for you, and start to build out really that 3 to 5 year model that you can start to implement as a benefits package. Do you need to quickly adapt to the employee benefits offered, culture, regional markets to be competitive? And really, again, with the PEO model, that there's options, but you're typically pretty stagnant to 1, the customization, and 2, the different customization within plan design, but and 2, within the carriers you can offer. We definitely see that with the medical, the dental, things like that, where especially with workforce nowadays, people are working in different states. So you want to make sure you have definitely a plan design and plan options that you can customize and that fit the needs of both you and your employees. So again, you kind of have a bit of a menu option today in the PEO, where outside of it, typically most benefit providers you work with are carrier agnostic. So you can look at other carriers and customize your plan designs to work for, again, your needs. As your employee and company growth increased to need with a robust and personalized service model, or model of service, excuse me. And again, Chris kind of had mentioned that it's PEO is kind of a one size fits all. Outside of that, do you need a certain HRIS system to support your growth? Are there different integrations? Even if there's different benefits that you want to offer? We see in today's job market a lot of time in those industries, like, you want to offer some different benefits that you might not be able to offer within the PEO model. So it really allows, both on the technology, but on the benefits being offered side, the ability to customize a lot of these to, fit the needs of your company, not only today, but, potentially down the line. We know everyone's needs change as well.
Okay, so now we're going to dive into the when, right? So those, as we just alluded to, why, right? Those are some triggers you might be thinking about. Maybe some folks in this call today, you've asked yourself those questions, and it might be time to, so now you've determined, okay, maybe it's time to look at evaluating this, right? And what life might look like outside the PEO. So when would be the best time for us to make the transition? So really, the good news is that if you're working with a certified PEO, and that designation is important, and I'll speak to it in a second, but you can leave at any point throughout the year. So the reason being is that certified PEOs, any dollars that folks have paid into payroll taxes, right, for the Social Security, federal, state unemployment, there's wage caps on those amounts, right? And certified PEOs, when you roll out of them, they do recognize those amounts. And when you go to a new payroll provider, that's going to be recognized by that payroll provider. So long story short, you don't have to, there's no double taxation, right? If you are with just a regular PEO who's not certified today, you're definitely not going to want to roll off until January 1st. The reason being is because there's going to be that double taxation concern, right? They're not going to recognize any payroll wages, any payroll taxes that you've paid to date. Any of those caps are going to wipe out and you're going to reset. So if you have a lot of folks who are high earners, those could be significant dollars. But if it's a certified PEO, all the big ones like TriNet, Insperity, ADP Total Source, they're all certified. You can leave at any point during the year. With that being said, a lot of the groups that Chris and I talked to, we kind of, position them for a January 1st start date. The biggest reason for that is because the taxation thing, although it sounds like it's easy and a smooth transition, sometimes there can be double taxation concerns there. So January 1st allows for employees to not have to receive 2 W-2s from the year prior, right? From a consolidation standpoint, it might be a little easier to roll out January 1st. The other reason being is deductible resets. So as Chris made mention of course, the plans that you're on through the PEO are one big plan, right, that everyone has access to. And deductibles, they run on a calendar year. And the deductibles reset on January 1st each year. So that's probably the cleanest, especially least disruption for your employees to start on January 1st, as opposed to if you move the middle of the year, if they've paid $500 in their $1,000 deductible plan, they may have to then, that gets reset back to zero, spinning out of the PEO. Well, now they're just out $500. So January 1st is usually what we recommend for all of our prospective clients who are looking to transition away. And then lastly, we'll just kind of get into the how, and this will be a majority of the presentation. But there are a lot of considerations to be made when transitioning out, right? And I think that's one of people's hesitation in moving away from the PEO. It's overwhelming. There's too many moving parts. There's too many different levers to pull. That's what Chris and I are trying to do, is to make, life seem as easy as possible for both you and your employees. So these are really the 5 considerations that need to be made. And then in the subsequent slides, we're going to kind of dive into each one a little bit further. But the first one is HRIS payroll provider, right? So of course, everyone's going to at least need payroll coming off the PEO. And then dependent upon the needs, as an organization, you're going to have to determine what you want to accomplish as an organization. Do you need recruiting? Do you need performance management software? Do you need learning management software? Do you need applicant tracking? There's so many different HRIS platforms out there that can either be combined with a payroll provider, or they might be, piecemeal, depending on what you guys are looking to accomplish. So you're definitely going to want to select something in that area, and then based off your needs and what you've determined as an organization. Benefits, insurance considerations, that's one of the big drivers, right? So you're going to have to get all your medical, dental, vision in place, also your workers' comp. Tax state registration. So we'll cover that as well. You're gonna have to set up some new state unemployment IDs, be cognizant of restarts. Compliance considerations, of course, the PEO is, from a compliance standpoint, they do a nice job. They're making sure that any, risks and responsibilities that you have as it relates to being an employer, they're making sure that you're covered there. So especially if you have multi-state employees, you're gonna wanna make sure that you have your ducks in a row as you transition away from the PEO. And we'll touch on a couple of those specific examples during the compliance slide. And then lastly, just coordinating timing, right? That's the biggest one. And obviously that's for you and your team. Timing is everything. Just to dive in a little bit more to the HRIS payroll provider piece. So like I said, there are so many options out there now for payroll and HRIS. So you as an organization have to determine what's important to you guys. There may be, to my point about you guys scaling internally, or your organization scaling internally, there may be things that you're doing right now, whether it be recruiting or performance management or rewards or compensation, you might have folks who are getting paid or on payroll who are handling that today. So you may no longer need that in a software, right? And that's kind of the HRIS piece. Finding a software that kind of fits your needs and based off where you're at today as an organization and not where you were a year, 2, 3, or 5 years ago when you first went on to the PEO. So really what we recommend there, identify a short list, right? Select the provider and implement. Another thing to keep in mind from a timing standpoint, any of these payroll providers or HRIS providers, and Chris and I have a handful of partners we work with here, but it's usually a series of about 3 or 4 meetings. So that's important to keep in mind. I mean, we'll talk about more of a general timeline down the road, but they're going to have probably, an initial discovery call with you guys. Then they're going to walk you through the technology demonstration. Then they're going to either walk you through maybe another needs analysis call before they get to that final proposal and that final call. So as you're kind of generating your timeline internally and kind of how many vendors you want to work through as you work through your due diligence, that's just something to keep in mind. It's probably going to be about 3 to 4 meetings before you actually come to a decision on who you want to align yourselves with rolling away from the PEO.
Chris kind of got into that technology piece, and obviously that is a huge component of it, that payroll, everyone's going to need it. And outside of that, another huge component is obviously the benefits. We had discussed, kind of some of those reasons potentially looking outside of it. How do you want to structure your benefits today? We see it definitely in the PEO that sometimes, groups are in 10, 15 different plans, and that's going to have to potentially be consolidated. So it's kind of looking at a structure of the direction, the benefits you want to offer. And that's from your group insurance. So it's your medical, dental, vision, life, disability, and maybe some of those other ancillary products, vendors, the FSAs, the HRAs, COBRAs, things like that. That's really what you want to consider of how do we want to structure this? And then it's kind of picking a partner, similar to what Chris had mentioned, that a broker shortlist, so a benefits partner there. You have the ability to maybe work with someone that, again, I think is huge to set up a timeline for this, who's experienced in this as well. Because I think putting together that benefits plan and that service model is huge. But as Chris mentioned, there's also other components of it. So make sure you're dealing with someone that has done this before, has a clear timeline and steps of, okay, this is kind of when we need things done, basically to hit these timelines. So as I mentioned, outside of that, you need to set up your benefit plans. Workers' comp's another big one. So out of the PEO, a lot of the times, all the time, workers' comp is also included. So that is something that outside of the PEO model, you need to go to a provider to secure coverage. So outside of that group insurance, workers' comp would be another thing that you need to look to partner with someone. And again, those ancillary providers that I had mentioned, the COBRA administration, the flexible spending account, maybe 401k. Again, I know sometimes the PEOs can't offer a 401k. We know a lot of times they are on the outside. So if you do need some of those providers, just know, kind of look for someone who can really help, administer all of those, but at least can help tackle and give suggestions as well.
And then additional considerations to be made, and I kind of alluded to this on the last slide, but there's certain tax state registration requirements that you certainly want to be cognizant of as you're rolling out. So as you may or may not know, depending on which states in which you're doing business in, you may or may not be using the PEO state unemployment rate. So you're going to want to make sure that certain states, depending on how many businesses, that if they're using the PEO state unemployment rate, you're going to have to reestablish state unemployment IDs in those states, right? And then the local tax withholding accounts that are parallel and run in alignment with that. Additionally, as I kind of made mention about in terms of when to start or when to roll out, you just want to make sure on your first payroll with your new provider that if you did roll off that certified PEO, that there were no restarts on your Social Security, your Medicare, or your federal. Medicare, there's actually no cap, but Social Security, federal unemployment, or state unemployment. That's really important because, like I said, if they're high earners, right, if you have high earners on your payroll, those can be significant dollars. So definitely something to monitor as you roll into your new payroll provider. And then compliance considerations, right? So as I made reference to, the PEO does a really nice job of making sure that any risk and responsibilities that you have as it relates to being an employer in the states in which you're doing business in, that they have those checked off, right? So things like leave policies, PTO policies, accrual policies, whatever it might be, disability, whatever it is, there's certain state requirements and they vary state to state. So you want to make sure that all of your leave policies are up to date in those states, your paid time off policies, your employee handbooks, right? You also want to confirm, you hear this term probably, rehiring of employees, which may scare you a little bit. It's truthfully a formality. Any good HRIS company that you're going to be working with is going to assist in obtaining new I-9 forms, and they're really going to make it a seamless experience for your employees. So if you hear that, term, well, we had to fire our employees and we went to the PEO, which is sort of not really correct, and then we have to rehire them, it's really just a formality. So don't let that get in the way of making the transition out. And then lastly, just the compliant company policies that I referred to above, leave, PTO, handbook, and so forth. Lastly, just from a timing standpoint, kind of the last consideration, you've checked all these boxes. You've said, it probably makes sense for us. Okay, you want to review your current PEO contract. Most only require a 30-day notice. So if you wanted to go live with, someone outside of a PEO on October 1st, you could let your PEO know September 1st and you'd be all set, right? And then of course you got to let additional carriers know as well, if you have anything outside the PEO. There are some PEOs who I won't mention by name, if they may lock you into a year or 2 year agreement, and they'll lock your rates in for 2 years or whatever. So there's some negotiating that goes on there, but most of the contracts that Chris and I, or most of the prospective clients that we've run into, their contract states 30 days and they can get out. From just like a general timing standpoint, 60 days is probably, it's really the minimum, right? From the anticipated effective date to ensure a seamless transition, meaning that could certainly make it happen. Chris and I always prefer anywhere from like 90 to even 120 at the most. That 120 is a lot, but you just want to make sure you're dotting all your I's and crossing all your T's. So if you were January 1st, if you wanted to roll something out, you'd probably want to start looking at it, mid-September to the, beginning of October type timeframe. And this would allow, ample amount of time for you to notify the PEO, for you to make sure that you notify your employees. You could run an open enrollment period for your employees who are going on to the new benefits plan. So 60 days is probably minimum, but as you're working through your timelines internally, I would make that kind of like, as I said, the minimum threshold upwards of 120 days to roll into a new solution.
So here we have, so this is, as I mentioned before, kind of a little breakdown of Sentinel and how we're a little unique in the benefit space, because we do handle a lot of not only the group insurance aspect of it, but a lot of the administration as well. So when you're kind of looking at providers outside of it for your group insurance, for your ancillary providers, there's a lot of things to consider, because as we mentioned, PEO, a lot of the, some of the reasons people really like the PEO model is because everything is integrated, or a lot of the times integrated, but, everything's within, that PEO platform. They don't have to go to outside vendors. So if you can, work with someone who can help on the group insurance side, but also the administration of the FSAs, the COBRAs, the HRAs, it allows for, definitely a more seamless transition, because, you're working as the plan sponsor with, 1 to maybe 2 vendors max. And also the employees know, okay, I need to go to, XYZ benefits company to handle all of my benefits if I have any questions. So we have we definitely have an integrated service model and service delivery here. From the plan design and consulting, enrollment and communication, administrative and compliance. I know Chris talked a lot about the compliance, and we don't mean to scare you. We just want to make sure we've been through this. And as I mentioned kind of before, you want someone who's done this, who has a clear-cut timeline, because Chris, not only coming from the PEO industry, but us helping groups roll out of it, we definitely have a clear timeline. And know what to look out for. And as I mentioned, we can really consolidate a lot of the administration and keep it the same look and feel of that PEO model, but give you the flexibility of adding plan designs, changing things up. So that's really what we were going for with our model here. And in the end, how we can help, not only from the plan design and communication aspect of it, but these are really things that you should be looking for when looking for a partner. I think definitely employee and employer support are huge, for us. when we're working with current clients and also prospective clients. Especially as you're rolling out potentially a new benefit, you want to make sure communication is key, specifically during that open enrollment period, but even beyond. You want to make sure you're maximizing the value of these benefits. You're typically spending a lot of money on these benefits. We want to make sure people understand them and value them, because if you aren't able to value something, if you don't understand something, you're really not going to be able to value it. So you want to make sure you're partnering with someone that's going to have a lot of open enrollment support, during meetings, Zooms, communications, whatever it may be. And then some of these, other one-offs, nice to haves, the benefit guides, benefit statements, employee surveys is huge. What we found, especially again, as I mentioned during, these times, what are employees thinking? Do they understand the benefits? Are they looking for anything else? So you really want to make sure, again, you're partnering with someone who can assist with a lot of these, different aspects, and really bringing the value, to your employees, helping you create a strategy where, you're communicating these things and, making sure they're understanding them. I think is a huge component to have when you're partnering with someone.
Okay, we do have one that came in. How is benefits administration handled outside the PEO? Very good question. Chris, you want to start on that one?
Yeah. So benefits administration, so that's another, again, component of the PEO. So that's, where employees are enrolling typically. So, new hire onboarding, they're typically going through the PEO. It's tied to the payroll, things like that. That's really, again, part of, looking at outside HRIS systems. A lot of payroll providers have built-in benefits administration platforms. So there are definitely plenty of systems out there that are integrated either in the payroll or integrated with payroll, where you could keep that same, again, look and feel where you're onboarding or terminating employees. They could go through that one platform. So, definitely, I would say a big component of selecting either an HRS or payroll partner, you want to make sure, again, it's integrated and flows through a lot of your other vendors as well.
And also, just the one other thing I'd add to that too, Chris, I know we talk about this a lot, kind of a component that gets forgotten about is the COBRA piece, right? So a lot of the COBRA administration, make sure that flows through the benefits administration platform, because that can certainly be a headache if you have to then go ahead and bring that in-house, rolling off the PEO. So it's really not an expensive line item. We even do it here at Sentinel. We're with the TPA on it. So that's certainly something you want to consider as you're transitioning away, is the COBRA piece as well. Okay, another question here. Like the PEO, would we be limited in the medical carriers we can choose from? Great question, Chris. I'll give my 2 cents on that and then feel free to jump in. So to Chris's point earlier, really where you're thinking about, regionally where you want to be competitive and kind of market your benefits. So I know a lot of times through the professional employer organization arrangement, you're only going to probably get a choice of one carrier in a given state, right? So here in Massachusetts, you might get access to Tufts, right? Or you might get access to Harvard Pilgrim, but you're not going to get access to, Tufts, Blue Cross, Aetna, and so forth. Nationally, you might get access to United Healthcare or Cigna, whatever it might be. So to answer the question, we would do multi-carrier marketing. So, Chris and myself, any good benefit broker would do their due diligence, take your information that you have as a company, send it out to a majority of carriers and just see what they all come back with. And then that allows us to get as competitive as possible from both a rate and a plan design standpoint. So we're not just kind of limiting ourselves to that one option in each state.
Definitely agree with that, we definitely want that. That's really a great point to it, is the customization that you have, starting off, but also on an annual basis. And as I mentioned, with that data that comes in, the more and more data we have, the more and more we can customize the plan design. But you do have access to those other carriers, which we can also use as a negotiation tactic as well. So for sure, customize when it comes to, who we can go to, but also the plan designs that you can offer as well.
So we have a question here from Lane. Really good question. Is there a typical threshold number of employees where it makes sense to get out of a PEO? So that's a great question, Lane. I don't know the average size, PEO client across the country. I'd have to suspect it's somewhere in the area of 25 to 30 employees. It really is kind of a case-by-case basis, right? It's dependent upon when you came in to the PEO arrangement, right? How small you were, and it's really based off growth. So if you've gone from 5 to 10 to 100 employees, that administrative fee is really going to start to creep up. Medical participation is a big driver too. So if you have, as you're growing, if you have less and less people taking the medical, usually the rates in the PEO, everyone knows that's kind of one of the drivers. The medical rates are going to be less than they are in the open marketplace. So as your medical participation starts to drop off and your administrative fees start to creep up, it really makes a lot of sense to kind of look at it then. So I know that's really not a direct answer because it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. I think as you get larger in that 50+ market, it really makes a lot more sense to look at it, which Chris will probably speak to a little bit too. I see him shaking his head because you get, not all of the claims are recognized, but it's that 50 to 99. It's kind of that gray area. And then 100+ really makes a lot of sense because you can go to alternative insurance, funding mechanisms, whether it's level funded, self-insured, and so forth. So I think as an organization, as you kind of get to that 50+ number, you should really start thinking about looking at an analysis and what life might be like outside the PEO from a headcount standpoint.
Like you said, it's just taking that holistic look, and that's part of the process. Because again, you can look at the rates, but you have to take, okay, what am I paying in fees? So it's not exactly an apples to apples, comparison. You want to look at the fees and obviously the medical premiums. And we do that a lot for groups. Again, you don't need to make the decision, right away to move. You can see what the numbers are. So that's something, again, that we help with groups a lot. It's seeing if it makes sense. Because like you said, sometimes it might not, but other times, as Chris mentioned, kind of as you do creep up, and we want to look at, okay, in the next 2-3 years, are you going to be growing by X amount? Then, maybe it's an easier transition now, rather when you creep up even more year over year. So it's definitely something we're happy to help look at as well. Like I said, you don't need to make a decision. If you want to see if the numbers make sense, then that really can be step one as well.
That's a good point. All right, and we have one final one here. How does the support education around our benefit program offering for our employees compare to the PEO? And Chris, you want to start on this one? I think it's a nice transition from your last slide there.
Yeah, so it's definitely, as I mentioned, we're huge on supplying a lot of education and resources for our employees and employers. We're big, and we want to make sure, as I mentioned, this is probably the second, third largest line item that you have, on the books is your benefits. We want to make sure that you're providing education, but also that's coming across to your employees, whether that's through, again, the open enrollment, but benefit statements. So, benefit statements is a great thing that, this is basically shows your benefits. This is what we're paying you, but this is also the other things we're investing in you. So we're really trying to provide a lot of tools to both the employees and employers. And
looks like that's all we had for questions come in. So we certainly appreciate everyone's time today. Hopefully you found this, valuable and worthwhile. As I mentioned, Chris and myself, we're starting to have a lot of conversations with groups, especially as they continue to scale up. In terms of what life might look like outside the PEO, because they're so focused on growing the company, they just haven't looked at it in a couple of years. So this was recorded. We'll certainly get that out. If anyone has any questions or anything additional, we're happy to answer as well. But if not, we can wrap up here.
Awesome.
Right.
All right.
Well, thank you all for your time, and we will talk to you soon.